computer science is so awesome because of the fact that even in that first class and those second class, right, you're really in the meat of it, right?
Julie Zelinski, thank you so much for being on my show. How are you?
Good, thank you.
It seems just like a few months ago we were back in the lab working on working in CS 107E.
Don't remind me. Those are the good old days.
Those were
that was a great quarter.
How was it online this past quarter?
Well, I think for CS professors, it was maybe, we had one of the easier jobs because we already do a lot of our delivery, right, remote, right? We do have a lot of students watching via video and time shifted and stuff. And so much of our expertise is in building tools and online sort of circumstances. It turns out, so we were able to adapt, right? We had an office hour queue, let's say, that we ran off of the web. Your average Latin professor, I bet, did not find it as easy a transition to move from their traditional in-classroom sort of way of doing stuff to this, or like the sciences, right, where you have all kinds of physical attributes. So I think we did a pretty good job in terms of transition. Our class was twice as big as we expected it to be, right, which I think indicated the students also kind of voting with their feet in terms of, where can I make progress, and work on my degree in this time of turmoil. And so we had a lot of people showing up in CS, I think, because it felt like a safe place to make some good progress, right?
I'm very curious to see what the trends are going to look like now that it's transitioning online, and how what people's choices are going to make. And but nothing will ever be able to replace the incredible mentorship that you and Pat provided, at least me and my cohort, coming into the breadboard and physically showing us how the wires. I don't think we'll ever be able to replace that, no matter how great we'll make virtual be. But Julie, I want to go back about your journey. One of the most popular computer science professors within Stanford, a renowned teacher. You love teaching, and at the same time you love code. Back at Next and then Apple, experience with Steve Jobs, and I want to capture everything in this talk, and it's going to be impossible, but we're going to start. Julie, who are you? Take me through your journey. How do you come to be one of the top teachers and lecturers at Stanford after an incredible career?
It's all it's a master plan I've known since day one. No,
I'm sure.
I came to Stanford myself as an undergrad, right, from a rural public California high school, right? I think without a lot of exposure to computers or the field or any of it, right? I was a math undergrad, in fact, all the way through, and I kind of picked up a little computer science late, right? Thought it was really neat, but it wasn't yet obvious to me how this was going to lead. It was just one step after another, right? You take one class, you kind of like it, you take another one, you think it's a fluke. I did pretty well at that. I liked it a lot, but I'm sure it gets a lot harder, right? It's gonna, but you keep kind of making the progress, right? I ended up at Next. Next was just kind of getting started, right, when I was an undergrad. And so at that point, they were still in the education-only market. So there was a lot of attention at the university level, right? And so I worked with an actual Next employee who would come to Stanford to teach this class, right, on how the Next was programmed, which I thought was super interesting. And it just totally, caught my fancy. Like the idea that object-oriented programming at that point was kind of relatively new, and when you saw the way it enabled certain kinds of problems to get solved, like that is so freaking cool.
Okay,
right?
Julie,
so,
I want to talk about that. Why is it so freaking cool when software is written well?
Yeah, because when you start to write code, right, you realize there are parts of it that are kind of tedious, right? Like, oh, you're running the same kind of code again and again, right? The idea that figuring out ways to capture that idiom, right, that commonality, and unify it and debug it and put it in a library and reuse it again, right, is just such a huge leverage point from which you can then go on to build and solve more interesting problems. So yeah, writing a linked list, sure, everybody needs to learn this as part of their kind of etude of computer science, but in the end, what you really want to be doing is solving these problems, and you're like, oh, I want to be looking at this data and teasing out these trends and figuring out what to do with this, or it's like, okay, I don't need to solve these problems anymore about a hash table. Hash table is super awesome and it's wonderful, but somebody needs to build a really awesome sorting machine, a really awesome hash table, a really awesome graphics subsystem, right? A 3D rendering engine, and then we all get to build on top of that, like starting on the 10th floor of our 20-story building, or the 99th floor of our skyscraper. And so the idea of figuring out ways our tools and our libraries and our systems can promote reuse, right? And so we talk about it even early in the sequence, right? We're always talking about the design.
I was about to say,
structure.
Julie, you have an incredible responsibility, not just as a computer science faculty member within Stanford, but you actually teach often the huge introductory classes as well,
Yeah,
like the
yeah,
abstractions in computer science. And this is really an introduction for a lot of students into the breadth of the complexity
yeah,
behind problem solving for computer science. What is that like to have the responsibility of having 400 students in an auditorium, and Julie is one
yeah,
of the first
yeah.
mentors and instructors they meet?
I mean, computer science is so awesome because of the fact that even in that first class or the second class, right, you're really in the meat of it, right? There isn't this really long prerequisite chain where you have to kind of spend a lot of time sort of, I think, on the background material before you can get going and
Right.
do something interesting. It's like from day one, right, in our CS 106A courses, right, we're solving little problems, right? It's like, okay, maybe it's Carol the robot, and it's kind of a little bit of a simplified world, but you're thinking logically, right? You're thinking about, repetition and if else kind of logic, and how you break things down into decompositional units. And it's like every step along the way is an opportunity to learn a little bit more of good engineering practice, right? And so I feel like at the end of those first two quarters, right, you have learned a lot that's actually very practical, and you can turn around and sort of start writing stuff and building stuff, right, and doing stuff with it.
People are
And that's
going
really
off to work
extraordinary.
to do internships at Google and Facebook
Yeah,
after taking these two
yeah,
quarters.
it's so accessible, right, to everyone, and that's so
Right.
extraordinary, right? Like, I'm not a chemist or a biologist or physicist, but I feel like there's these really long chains before you're able to do something with, let's say, chemistry, right? That where you're really kind of putting in their practice, right? And the CS, it's like such a neat, steep ramp from I know nothing to I can actually do some kind of pretty neat things in such a short period of time. That's really an awesome place to be.
So then, what is sort of your idea or your vision, and also Stanford's, in terms of how do you get somebody who comes in and says, I want to learn computer science within this incredible institution, Stanford? How can you best prepare me over the next 4 years to be the greatest, thinker, problem solver that I
Yeah,
can be? Because there's a very clear mindset into this, logical sequence that we take, and I'm in it right now, and I'm loving it. I'm so impressed
yeah.
by how well thought out it is. Talk to me a little bit about that.
It's totally a team effort, right? Like, I mean, I think we have a very strong curriculum design committee, right? That is in place for the long haul, right? And we're constantly looking at our offerings, and there is one thing that's a little bit different about Stanford relative to other R1 institutions is that we do have a what we call an ed group, the ed affairs group, right? When there are like 10 of us, right? And that we are teaching only faculty, right? And so the intro sequence, CS 106 and 109 and 107, 108, one like that, are taught by this group of lecturers
Okay.
and teaching faculty. And that means that we give 100% of our heart and soul to making sure that the intro sequence,
I didn't
right,
even
and the
know
way our
that.
courses
That's
are taught.
amazing.
Yeah. And then as you transition sort of out of intro and into the upper division, right? So you start to hit compilers and machine learning and graphics and stuff like that. And so you'll encounter the traditional research faculty. So someone like Pat, most of those are also people who are very interested and care about teaching a lot, but
Yes.
they're also have an extremely rich and amazing career as a researcher, which necessarily means that their attention is going to be split a little bit more, right? And they have more attention placed on mentoring grad students, right, and whatnot. So us being there, right, to make sure that, like, for example, we do a ton of teacher mentoring, we do a bunch of TA training, right?
Right.
We bring our undergraduates in to work with us in the intro sequence, right, which kind of gives us a pipeline of people to step up to be
Of
graduate
course.
TAs, right? And
Julie,
just
how do you improve? How do you improve on this process? Because you teach a class of 400 students. You've just taught it for 10 weeks, and now you have a 1 week break, and you're about to teach it again. And as
yeah,
any good computer scientist, you want to improve and learn for the next
yeah.
iteration. So how do you go about doing that?
Well, everything I work on, you can ask anybody who's gone behind me will tell you that in the directory for the file, where the files like the code or the write up or the rubric or any of the material software, there's a file on there whose name is called for next time, right? It's in all capitals, right? And it's always named the same thing, but I put it right there, like it's right by the lecture, it's right by the section, it's right by the lab. And it reminds me of, as we were doing it, what was happening. What was there something that students got tripped up on it? Was there something the TAs told me about it, right? Was there something I just felt coming out of the lecture, or if I got a chance to review the lecture itself, I'm like, oh, you know what, that just wasn't that clear, or I need a different example. And I make those myself, and I leave them right there, because it's the only place I'll remember it. If I put it anywhere else, right, it's not going to be where I am. So at the point when I'm preparing that lecture, I'm going to start with, the last time I had it, I'll be like, oh, look what I wrote down, right? This example fell flat, or this, didn't needs to be fixed, or we need to fix this explanation or whatever. So they're littered throughout everything I work on.
That's amazing.
It has to be there, because you're right. It is. Everything is so in the moment for teaching, right?
Right.
And it's a 1,000 little to do items, right? Of this week's lecture, this week's assignment, this week's lab, that exam, right? So that you need a system to kind of keep each of them. And then I'd say bigger things, like if you're thinking really about restructuring an entire class or really doing something like that, right, is generally going to be something that we work on more as a team, right? Like if there's a much bigger kind of, let's all get together, let's all brainstorm, let's all, think about whether, like, we recently switched our 106A course, which has been in Java for, 10 years, right, to Python, right? And that was a huge effort of a lot of people, right, to survey what other schools are doing, right, to look at tools that are out there, look at ways it would change our pedagogy, look at the ways it's going to affect other parts of our curriculum.
So how long have you been teaching these monumental classes within Stanford?
So I've been here since 1992.
Wow. So what changed since then? So you've seen quite a few. You've seen quite a few students go by. Are we different than others?
Yeah. It's in some ways it feels like nothing's changed, because like the core of it is still as beautiful and as pristine and kind of heartfelt as it ever was, which is, I would say one of the things that's really important about Stanford is that our intro class is our intro for everyone. That we don't have a majors entry point and a non-majors entry point and an advanced student, sort of thing like that. It's like, oh, there is 106A, which is designed to be, we call it the Big Tent, right? It brings in everybody. We want everyone to give a chance to it and be taught in the way we want, like to build a foundation for all computer scientists. So having, like, some of these are classes like physics for poets or something like that, where it's like, oh, you're really not going on, so we're going to give you a different or a light version. And we really don't want to do that. We don't want you to have to select before you've had a chance to really try it. And so we want to give you the same grounding we give everyone. We really try hard to get people to start in the intro sequence, even if they have the background to sometimes jump ahead. We often think that we can do such a good job with kind of setting the right foundation for you that we want you to give it a try, that don't be in a hurry to jump ahead, because there's things, even in the simple exercises, where we can just imbue you with really good habits that we want you to carry forward.
Definitely. So, by the way, is part of this?
I want to say, what did we change? I would say we've changed the language, we've changed the tools, right? Our enrollments have gone crazy large, right?
Right.
But in the essence of it, I still think we're doing the same thing we've always wanted to do all along, which is show you how empowering and awesome it is to be able to control this computer, and then give you this really good grounding in the fundamental sort of tools and technique and mindset that makes you be an excellent engineer.
That's so cool. Julie, what's missing from CS education at Stanford or anywhere in the world? Where are we at now? And what big milestones do you hope for us to get to in, let's say, 5 years?
But I think we need to keep looking at the service part of the equation. That I think we serve our majors extraordinarily well, right? I think we have a great curriculum with a lot of flexibility, and the undergraduate, the master's curriculum, the PhD, all of that is really, really good. I think we need to keep working at ways to give computing power to people who aren't computer scientists in a way that makes sense for them. And so as I said, we have this one sequence and it's for everyone, and that's great. And I do think up to a point we can definitely keep everybody together. But there are places where there's kind of jumping off points where I think we need to, like, for example, there are a lot of people who want to get uh, data science type skills, machine learning type skills, but aren't going to make computer science their number one focus. And so maybe they're a biologist or sociologist, right, or historian, right? And so I think figuring out ways that we can be sure to coordinate and support sort of, giving those skills to people who want, like the way the writing center, for example, might be like everyone needs to learn how to write persuasively and attentively. And so figuring out how we can be computer science support as a service learning for all people, right? I'd say another big area for us is to dig more deeply into the ethical implications of the work we do. That I think we've had a kind of a little bit of a, like, hey, we're technology, we're neutral, we're just teaching you how algorithms work, right? And how, how to evaluate them for performance or for robustness or correctness. But there's really growing awareness that there are absolutely sort of opportunities for us to be reflecting on the bias in the data sets we use and in the problems we're trying to solve and in the implications of our work in a broader social context, which I think we need to figure out how to make that happen up and down across the curriculum. Like, I think we've traditionally sort of had an idea if there's a class that, or two that's about ethics or social implications. And I think we just need to weave that through our discipline all the way through to be sure we're making responsible and ethical choices at every step.
Incredible. Julie, take me back now to Next and then Apple. Now you're out of Stanford.
Yeah.
You're entering, this tech scene. You get to work with Steve Jobs. I mean, what is this like? It's so weird that I get to speak to somebody, from the roots of it. This is incredible.
Yeah, it's like, I think it's like when I look back at it now, it seems more amazing than at the time. I didn't know any better, right? It was basically my first job out of school, right? And so like I thought it's completely normal that you have like a superstar, right? Like for the longest time, like I had this kind of dingy car, this Datsun B210 that was like, kind of an old junker of a car. And I used to park a little bit far away from the building because I thought my car was kind of ugly and run down, and I was, still just paying off my student loans. And I parked it kind of away around the corner from the building, kind of a little bit out of shape. But it was interesting how there was often a black Porsche that would also be in this same spot I picked. It happened to be the kind of first one around the corner from the building. And it was a black Porsche with no license plates, which at the time I didn't know these stories yet about how Steve was kind of apparently like just couldn't be bothered to get a license plate for his car, right? And so depending on who got there first, like either I would have the spot or the black Porsche would have the spot. And I didn't realize it was Steve's car until one day, right? I come out and he's parked in the next spot over and he's standing by his car talking to somebody, right? And I'm coming out to my car and he scolds me for like parking in his spot. And I'm like terrified. I've been there, I don't know, not that long, right? Like a few months or something, but like, I think I'm about to get fired over but he was kind of kidding. He didn't really care. It was just funny that like everybody else apparently all knew that don't park in Steve's spot, right?
Wow.
But like, I'm like, oh, whatever. I'm just trying to hide my ugly car over here. But anyway, so that's
unbelievable. How many people were at Next when you joined over there?
So we were probably close to 200 people at that point, right?
Wow.
I think we've had maybe 400 or 500 at our kind of biggest, right? When we were doing both hardware and software, but then kind of we did cut our hardware business and scale back to the softwares. We're probably like, so at the time we got acquired, we probably were back down to 200 again. So we were pretty small that whole time, I would say.
Wow. What did you look? What are some of the most important lessons you learned from that time that then you took with you as you then transitioned back to education?
Yeah. I loved working at Next, but the strongest memory, of course, was just the people, right? The people who were hired there and the kind of their passion for what we were doing was just really infectious, right? And maybe the biggest lesson I took away from Next was I had to go back to grad school because I was working with so at that point I had an undergrad degree in math. My training in CS was pretty thin, right? I was learning a lot on the job, right? I was working in an engineering capacity, but I was definitely a junior person, right? And there were all these people around me who just had, a wealth of knowledge and experience and practice that I was super envious of, right? And I can remember, people would casually toss off terms or tools or, well, when I was at Sun, we did this kind of stuff. And I just I was hungry for that same kind of experience, that the same kind of underpinning of what they knew that helped them to make great decisions going forward. And so it was great to work with them and learn from them, but I also knew I needed to kind of go back to the source myself and kind of strengthen up my own.
Did you realize that at the time you were working with some of the greatest pioneers of
Yeah,
in this
it's like
domain?
it seemed normal to me, but that was because I never had a real job before. I mean, it was in high school. I
Wow,
worked in a player piano place, right? Like the idea that I I thought it was super normal to have this just incredibly high-powered, really dedicated, really talented group of people that just
incredible.
solved problems and batted ideas around. I can still remember the way it felt like, well, since we're so small, like you could make decisions about things. It's like you keep looking for some, like, do we have to get some approval? I can remember going to Bertrand Serlet, who was the head of the workspace development at the time, and there was this decision we needed to make about how something was going to happen. And so I go to him. He's relatively new too, right? So we have this conversation about what their options are. We bat some ideas around, and he says, okay, I think we should do this. And I'm like, well, okay, but like, that's just you and me. We're like just two foot soldiers here. Like, don't we need to go get somebody else? Like, let's look for your mom. I don't know what you like, something you think we have to have some. It's like, no, that's what we do. This is what we were hard to do, is make these decisions and make this stuff happen. And you're like, oh,
Unbelievable.
I guess we just get to do that. And
Unbelievable.
that happened again and again, just lots of cool things to do and smart people to work with. And so from it, I said I had to go back to grad school. So I'm like, I want to be able to go deep on some of this stuff, and school is going to be a good place for me to do that. I mean, I think there are other people who learn in different ways. It wasn't the only way maybe to kind of catch up to that level of expertise, but for me, it was kind of I had been a good student, and I think school kind of worked for my mindset and my level of obedience, maybe, or something like that.
That is so cool. Julie, as I go on my journey and a lot of my friends going on their journey, into computer science or at Stanford in general, what is the one
Yeah.
piece of advice you would give, a young student as we're about to go and, absorb so many classes from so many incredible instructors? What are some things that I can keep in mind as I go through this journey and maintain perspective?
Wow. There's so many great things about Stanford, right? And so many great experiences, right? And the one thing I would say is just be mindful of picking and choosing, right? Realizing that saying yes to something, right, often means having to say no to something else, and kind of thinking about, like, as you look at things, there's going to be lots of things that sound really awesome and are really awesome, but if they're not right for you, right, they're going to eat away from getting on the things that really matter for you. So, like, sometimes it's easy to get people get I think a little bit sidelined into, oh, but somebody else is doing this and that sounds really cool, or that's, this seems kind of interesting, or I want to take all these classes, I want to have a double major, I want to do all this stuff, and like, it's almost like by spreading yourself too thin, you miss some of the discernment of saying, what are the things I really want to be sure I get from Stanford, and I want to make sure I don't miss out on, and that really are going to kind of fuel me for the future, and then recognize that as I say yes to those things, I want to say yes wholeheartedly and enthusiastically, and that's going to give me the strength to also say no to things that would otherwise kind of cut into that.
I love it.
I see a lot of students, right, who just seem like they're just really spread very, very thin, and I feel like that, like it's they get very overcommitted, right, and then they're dealing with, I think, a lot of stress and a lot of I think suboptimal sort of results for that.
No, I agree. I mean, I think that one of the things that I came in and was completely blown away was by the number of opportunities, and all of us, everywhere you turn, somebody's doing something so cool, and coming in, it's like in a playground. You just want to go on different rides and get all the different fruits, and I think that one of the hard lessons that I had to learn, as well as my friends, is understanding that, okay, well, if we really want to enjoy this time and make it work for us, we need to also be able to devote ourselves to the projects we commit to, and it's not going to do service to anybody if we just go and do 22 units and do 5 clubs. So I completely I take this with me wherever I go. You
already have that advice. It turns out I have to give you a different piece of advice next time, right? Because that is a great thing to have already.
I'm gonna come back for many more advices along the way, but Julie, I have to get 3 words that you would use to describe yourself.
Okay, I'm gonna give you curious.
All right.
Because I think that's driven a lot of what got me everywhere I wanted to be, was just wanting to know, wanting to kind of see it through. And then it comes with a heavy dose of stubborn, because I think that's stubbornness and curiosity, I think, drive all the debugging in the world, right? It turns out, right, is I'm going to figure this out, and I'm going to know why, and I'm going to get there. And then I think what makes me a teacher, I think, is enthusiasm, right? Like,
I love it.
when I first, the reason I can say, I think almost definitively why I'm a teacher is anytime I learn something, right, the first thing I'm thinking about is, who am I going to tell that to?
Wow.
Like I read something in a paper or see it online or go to a talk, and then I'm like, who else wants to hear this really cool thing that I learned? So I think that's
so
if
cool.
you see yourself as this conduit for like information to come in and flow out, then teaching may be the career you want to look at.
I love it. Okay, Julie, thank you very, very much. This was inspiring. This was, I learned so much, and I can't wait to share this with the world. Thank you for taking the time to do this.
Thank you, Michael.
And thank you for an amazing quarter of 107E, and I can't wait to do more classes with you. It was really inspiring, really.
Yeah. I wish that's a whole topic we could go off for a long time about, is like how phenomenal it is to work with the people at Stanford, right? So Pat Nannerhan, our co-instructor, right, who was a Turing Award winner, like I just never thought I would spend my career in the company of such luminaries, nonstop, right? So it's been really a
for a
great
student,
ride.
it's a very humbling experience all of a sudden to be exposed to that. Julie, thank you very, very much. Have a great rest of the day, and stay safe and stay healthy.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.